and we have a new person in amongst us to nerd out. Would you say you're a circular economy nerd, Sally?
I've been called that.
Okay. Well, you know, I was pretty sure we were in a good spot for that. So, but Sally Ann Kasner from ThinkStep, also a life cycle and circular economy professional, and she's also based here in Adelaide. So I always like to think that Adelaide has some of the best minds in all of Australia. So we've invited Sally to be able to join us as well. So please make Sally welcome to the stage.
Oh.
And I'm stealing a little bit of a format, which was told to me is more of like a yarn circle format of panel discussion. So what's going to end up happening is that we're going to take turns asking each other questions instead of me being the dictator of the panel. And then, of course, we're going to bring in you all. We ready? We ready, Adelaide?
Ow!
Okay, good. All right. So, Sally, thank you for sitting strategically right to my right, because my question's to you.
Yeah.
To start off. So I'm going to be weird and be like, you've come to SA from SA.
That's right.
Right. So you've come to South Australia from South Africa.
Yes.
And
good accent.
I tried.
Wow.
Don't mock accents.
Oh, gosh.
I'm American. I can mock any accent I want because everyone mocks my accent here in this country. But obviously that gives you quite a international perspective on approaches to circular economy. So I really wanted to see if you could give us a little bit of intel around some kind of like wins in the circular economy globally, but also what are probably some key differences from your experiences in Africa as well as Australia, because I'm pretty sure the dynamics are quite different.
Absolutely. How long we got? I'm joking. But basically,
don't stress me out.
Yep. So I'm from South Africa, and I've actually only been in Australia for about 1.5 years now. So still very new and getting to know how things are working here. But I come from an emerging economy experience, which is quite different, to be honest. And so depending on where you are, I don't know how many of you have traveled to South Africa. Anybody? No? Yeah?
Got a couple.
Yes. Okay, so great place to travel. Just a plug there. Tourism, amazing. You'll see the big five and all this kind of, and the people are really cool. However, we have lots of challenges, right? Which kind of then push us into various avenues of actually trying to ensure that we can still participate in an economy. So what I mean by that is that, when we looked at some of the things that we've gotten into, it's not necessarily because of circular economy, it's through necessity. So, for example, energy and just having electricity and a secure grid is it's not a guarantee, right? So some of our roots down to circularity have really come from that. Quite a few years ago now, Cape Town almost ran out of water.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We literally were days away from running out of water. Our dams were empty. So basically, through that, we've just naturally started building up resilience in terms of how we design, how we build, how do we cater for this, and how do we reuse our resources well. So whenever we think about design of a building, it's kind of like, well, where is our water coming from? Where is our electricity coming from? How are we going to treat? How are we going to use this water appropriately? So it really comes down to that kind of thing. What is also cool is that we've, because of this emerging economy status, maybe not the cool side, is that we also get lots of, and not to take too much of the stage, is that sometimes decisions made elsewhere, we've got different trade dynamics, right? So from an emerging economy perspective, we often get, and an African perspective, we often will get secondhand clothes or very cheap imports, like everywhere, right? That's everywhere. That's not just emerging economy. But secondhand imports, not only of clothes, but of cars, of computer equipment. And it's coming from a good place. right? It's coming from a really good place, but unfortunately then it comes onto an African continent and we can't use it. So we've got those are problems. So what I love about what I'm doing now is the fact that I can see we're in a global village. The choices we make here, the decisions we make here from a policy and a legislation perspective actually have impact on elsewhere. And so when we do make these policy decisions and changes, we should be taking those into account, not just thinking about us in Australia or in the Asia Pacific region. It's like, what happens when we need to transition to a renewable energy space, and where are we getting those critical materials from, etc. So yeah, I could talk for hours on this. One last little thing though. So one of the things when we discovered when the circular economy started gaining traction, because we all know that the circular economy is not new, right?
Not at all.
It's not. Just gonna re-emphasize that it's really been around for many, many, many years in terms of like the Earth being around, and essentially what is great about it. I'm an environmental scientist by training, and we've been talking about this kind of stuff for many, many years, but it doesn't sell. Saving the environment doesn't sell. The circular economy is really capturing the attention of doing business differently. And I think that is beautiful, and we can use that because essentially without a natural environment, our life becomes very tricky. I'll stop there.
That is incredibly true. And yeah, I really appreciate sort of those dynamics that you're talking about, and actually understanding that material flows aren't just a state kind of thing. A lot of people, like even with the COVID thing, and there's been a lot of discussions around relocalize and things like that. But then, like in actual fact, we also have to kind of think about whereas there's just efficiencies. Like sometimes it is just more efficient that if someone has the infrastructure overseas, that we think about those trade routes so then they can actually process those for whether it's a region or all those other kind of aspects. So thank you so much for that perspective, Sally. And I will make sure that you can ask Nick
read the question.
Yes, indeed. Where is it?
Nick, is for you.
Well, you can actually just ask whatever question.
But I can't remember what it is.
Well, just ask whatever you want.
Oh,
You have to make
just make it up. You can make it up. Here you go.
But this one's way clean.
Okay.
It sounds smart. Oh, yes. Okay, so Nick, how has Arup seen the uptake of the Circular Buildings Toolkit internally and externally? And are there some new conversations that have, come from that in the engineering space?
Yeah. So I suppose I want to preface this answer with I'm not involved in the circular economy like kind of day-to-day basis. I remain in contact with our regional team, and I know I've seen the numbers on the investment that's being made into the tool on behalf of Arup, and the continued support of the tool and the upgrade of the tool, and anecdotally about its use, both inside of Arup with our clients, but also outside of Arup, which is fantastic. And I think the partnership with Ellen MacArthur has been really good, and just being able to effectively offer that tool to everybody, I think is really good, because hopefully it's a useful tool that encourages people to think about these strategies and actions at the right stage of a project. With exact numbers, I don't know, but based on, like I said, based on the investment made, I'm expecting that it's increasing in use, and based on the kind of discussions that we had today, I would expect that this kind of approach, whether it's using the Circular Building Toolkit or other strategies, it should just be a business as usual on every at the start, at the inception of any activity involving the built environment. We should be taking a moment to pause and figuring out, well, do we actually need this thing, and going through all of those strategies to ask the question. And I think that will everybody doing that is going to help shift the mindset of in the case of the Flinders project, which we have to talk about afterwards because we're both working on that. But the fact that the politicians and the public servants involved in that project are tasked with more beds, quick, cheap. That's the objective of the project, and that's important and understood. But without taking a step back and asking some of those questions at the right time, you can miss a lot of opportunity, I think. Yeah, and I know we need to introduce some of these concepts to the project managers, for example, that aren't aware of them. So yeah, that's your job tonight, actually. Well, not tonight, but all of your job here is
For the rest of your life.
well, for at least the near future, is to go out and not specifically promote the circular building toolkit tool, but to try within your spheres of influence to poke and prod and suggest, well, should we be asking this question? And here's a tool that you can use to ask that question. And have you heard about this? Because then the more that we do that as individuals, and the more that we demand of the industry, the greater the industry will provide with that system approach that will build around. Yeah, sorry, I've gone off track a little bit, but
not at all.
We
It's
love
right
it.
on track.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
That's right on track.
So yeah, but I'm a big advocate of the tool. So yeah, even on projects where we're not paid to use it or do it, I'm sort of pushing it to the right people on the project to say, just do this and let's have a session. Yeah, like we had today.
Yeah.
Yeah, highlighting the big opportunities.
Yep.
Yeah. Would you like to ask
Do you
a
have
question of Jody?
for me?
Oh, I do, but I can't remember what the question was. But I'm gonna.
I didn't read it, so
Yeah, but I've got
No,
a
no
question for you.
briefing.
Yeah. No, I hope this is a good question. So
no,
I'm.
say it came from Ken, right?
No, it's my own question, but I'm fascinated to
Jody.
understand. Obviously, you're like a circular expert, and you've got a team of people around you working in that circular economy space. I'd be interested to know from your perspective, what are the kinds of more sophisticated clients that are interested in this space and actually go, yeah, this is really important. We need to get Jody's team in to talk about this. Who are those clients? And are we sophisticated local? So this is the second part of the question. Locally, how are we doing, or is your client base outside of South Australia?
Such a bloody tricky question, Nick.
Sorry, I thought it was easy.
No. Well,
Still a good question,
okay.
though.
Yeah.
Hey, first bit, the concept of a circular economy expert, right? Like we were talking today, everyone's got this piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And I feel so dumb every time I'm in a room because everyone's got their knowledge and their bit that they're bringing to it. So I feel really uncomfortable with being called a circular economy expert because I feel like all I do is prod and ask questions and listen to people and understand, what are they doing? So I just feel like this incredibly curious person that's constantly chatting with other people that know stuff. But I always feel like I'm the person that knows least in the room. So it's really interesting that I actually feel uncomfortable with that title, but I think that's...
Okay, we'll call you a circular economy facilitator.
I call myself an advocate.
Advocate. Okay, yeah.
That's where I decide that I feel okay. I advocate. Sometimes I talk about being the cheerleader of the circular economy.
Yeah.
Because, and then the question about where different clients are at, the level of sophistication and stuff like that. I just find every organisation is so different. Every geography is different. And within every organisation, it's different too, right? So you might have a pocket of an organisation that gets it, that's really gung-ho, and maybe that's at the CEO board level, so it flows down. Maybe that's over in a certain team, so you might have a pocket of amazing developments in Brisbane or whatever, but it's not kind of spread over the entire country. And I think a lot of our job is to sort of meet people where they're at, and just try to kind of bring them up to the next step after that, and help them disseminate out as well. So you get to work, and I kind of feel like the kind of really cutting edge out there, amazing projects, I'm not sure if they're always the ones that have the most impact. So I know there's really amazing, perfect projects out there, and you probably, lots of them are on the Toolkit website. They're super funky, super out there. But actually working with a government on looking at their procurement policy and getting some really hard-hitting targets in there that might be a little bit more boring, but pulling them up to that next level and infecting them with this kind of conversation as well. So presenting at different levels. So I kind of feel like I do a lot of that work as well. So it's not always terribly glamorous either.
No.
It's just helping people take that next step and feel really comfortable that they have a role to play in this as well. So, and there's a lot of different technical disciplines that are involved in that as well. There's the kind of framework and thinking, and then, so actually materials passports is something that will unlock things for you. So let's try to get some of the right things in there. Or this is a policy question, so let's get, and the skill sets are so diverse and different, and just knowing where to kind of plug them in.
Yeah. So you mentioned governments. Are private, is the private industry thinking about it as much?
Yeah, totally. And they go faster.
Yep.
They go faster, and when they figure out that something can make business sense, they're able to just do it so much quicker than government. And I mean, we've seen it with carbon-related things in this country that industry's been waiting for the government to catch up for years. Like, they've all had their targets in place and going, we know we have to do this because everywhere else in the world's doing it. And so, government's been kind of dragging behind. I think often in the circular economy space, it's quite similar.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah. And is there any question you'd like to ask someone?
Well, I'm going to ask Ken. So I'm just making this up now. So Ken, I'm really interested. So we're all kind of in that consulting advice space, and you're now in Lendlease, where you're in that implementation side of things, a big organisation as well. So I imagine that there's pockets that move really quick and pockets that don't. So what's your experience of going from advocating and educating and being the expert to actually being inside the machine that implements?
I'm still doing a lot of advocating and enabling and things of that nature. It just comes with a little bit more grunt. So it is an interesting one because it in some cases you want an organization that has so much leverage in the, I guess, material, like especially procurement, and just holds so much weight. And it's not just Lendlease; it's any type of developer, which also includes government. So I think that's where procurement things kind of come into place. That's probably the strongest way to create consistency across the products that are kind of delivered. Because, like you said, right now I see pockets of excellence. Pockets of excellence here on this kind of project. This this project manager has this one. He's like, something clicked on a past project, and they're like, nope, we know exactly what to do, and we want to implement it that way. Even when we talked about adaptive reuse, or do we have to build? Like, as a developer, it's like, what are you talking about? Yes. We definitely do. We definitely do need to build. But then the conversation becomes like, how do we do that in a manner that is actually going to create the best outcome? Because from I guess when Lendlease participates more in urban renewal, it's sort of like, if that outcome doesn't work, then all of a sudden that product is no longer an asset, because Lendlease holds on to a lot of different kind of things. So it's quite interesting. Like, for myself, it's like, okay, these are leverage points. It has to perform. It has to be attractive. It has to continuously get investment into those products. So how do we actually do that going forward? Now the leverage in finances all tilt toward carbon. And then probably after carbon would be sort of like circular economy, and then after that would be ecological restoration. And I guess for us in the nerd circle is like, how do we actually leverage that to really be able to, because you talked about, Sally, you were mentioning in other places, it might just be like we have to do it because if we don't, we don't survive. But then all of a sudden, like all these economic opportunities are hitting now.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
so now it's sort of like, oh, do you really care about money? All right, if you really do care about money, then we have to make sure that we're implementing these kind of strategies, really thinking this kind of through. And the other kind of aspect, sorry that I'm going off on a long rails, but then it's like the social, the social license to operate means that your business also needs to catalyze other businesses, which is something that is an exciting bit because it's like, okay, what where are the areas that we actually do need infrastructure? How do we advocate for that with the leverage that we have? If it's organizations that are bringing things to market, and there's either testing or commercialization opportunities, how do we actually bring that up to be part that can actually enable circular economy? How can we actually investigate it? Does it go like this? Definitely not. It doesn't go like that. But then I think the role that organizations that have the leverage of Lend-Lease, we should take that quite responsibly in driving those kind of interconnections as well. Yeah, not just the outcome, because the organization also has so many interconnection leverage. Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah. Now, if it seems like y'all are just, wow, that was an amazing start to the conversation. I don't even know how to step in here, but it's sort of like a Latin dance social. Don't think too much about it. Just jump in. So whenever y'all are ready, make sure you're not going to make a fool of yourself.
Ken's got that covered.
Yes, exactly. But I'm going to toss something back there for our continued chat because, especially if we're talking about economic opportunities, everything in our society, it's like, how do we quantify that?
Right.
Oh, yeah. And I'll just be totally transparent. There's actually a lot of project briefs that come out and saying you need to quantify the improvement of circular economy. I'm like, cool. How do we do that?
Well, there are a number of different indicators, and no, there are a couple.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there aren't like, and I think the consistency is key, number one. Yeah. But also, so there are a couple, like the material circularity indicators one. There's another one called CTI, which is the Circular Transition Indicators tool. And they're useful for different reasons, right? But essentially there are some indicators out there, but we just need to be able to find ones that are consistent and also evaluate what you're trying to evaluate. Yeah. There are so many indicators for carbon, for circularity, for all of these things, but what are we actually wanting to try and do? I'm starting to maybe just change it just quickly, but on that, because we focus on carbon, but sometimes we forget that actually carbon's linked to water. Water and carbon, you can't actually break them apart, but yet we do all the time. So the carbon cycle is linked to the water cycle. It's linked to our soil. All of those things are connected. So when we start compartmentalizing things, I think sometimes we make it, we focus, we have tunnel vision, right? So the indicators are great, but always remember where they're coming from and what you're needing them for and how you're going to use them. And then remember the system when we're looking or thinking about circularity, because it's different to the way we're trying to do other things.
I'm smiling because we've both got a bit of a LCA bent as well. So very focused on indicators and having multiple indicators as well, and not just looking at one. And something that I find really interesting about the concept of measuring circularity as well is it important to measure circularity for circular sake, or do we want to measure the impacts and outcomes that come from circular strategies, right? So, and I'll do both. I'm a consultant. Whatever you pay, I'll do. But so there's a circularity indicator but it's really interesting to unplug that and go, all right, so this project's more circular than that project, but what does it mean in terms of outcomes? And that's carbon outcomes and waste avoidance and water and all those things as well. So I like kind of turning on its head and going, yeah, you can measure circularity, but if you lose sight of the outcome focus, you can do a bit of greenwashing as well. Like, oh, isn't this funky because I'm recycling this thing, but actually there's no benefit to that. You need to just let it go. So I'm really keen on not having that those perverse outcomes that can come when you're measuring the wrong thing.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, for sure.
And I don't actually measure stuff.
Are you sure? I'm quite sure you
I
measure a
measure-
facade.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, I
you
do
know,
all
like
that
a
stuff,
thickness
but-
of glass.
But yeah, with these sorts of actions, I'm just like more is better. So the more initiatives that we can think about and implement and actually gain traction on projects, the better. And the more systems and supplier systems that we see in the market, like X-Frame is like the poster child at the moment in South Australia. Well, I mean, they're not from South Australia, but have a South Australian presence. But those sorts of products are, more of those will come to market and be like off-the-shelf solutions instead of you going down the street to salvage materials or you trying to implement things on a sort of person by person basis.
In the ideal world, it's easier to be circular rather than be linear. Like right now, it's so hard. You have to put so much effort into reclaiming or reusing things.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice in the future that actually it's really, really hard to throw something out?
Yeah. Well, the irony
wouldn't
is
do
that
it.
Mother Nature figured this out years ago and has been
100%.
circular forever.
Yeah.
So we kind
3.1
of just
billion
messed it up somehow. Yeah. Anyway.
We have you breathe.
Yeah, we
What's your question? what's your question?
Well, argue that what you can measure, what you can measure, you can manage. So you need to have some metrics, and I
You
guess part
definitely
of
do. Yeah.
the successful thing about green building certifications that you can benchmark and you can compare and you can tell the client we achieved the goal.
Yeah.
So that will be my argument to that we do need some sort of measurement.
Yeah.
But still, it's not clear yet how we can do it. How can we benchmark? And we need to have some of those targets, I guess.
Yeah,
set up
I might have
for us
been being a bit flippant saying measurement is not a thing. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that as a design professional, I see on projects when you have a tool or a framework like Green Star or something. Sometimes you get distracted by the metric as opposed to the actual outcome.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. If you can't measure it, then has it happened? Yeah.
A question in the back?
Yeah, Nick, you touched on the Pirry Street repurpose.
Yep.
Where do we see that conversation around commercial buildings turning to residential? What's holding it back?
Yeah.
In bigger cities, I suppose. What are the things? What are the barriers around that?
I've done a lot of reading into this because our business is in the building space very focused on wanting to work with existing buildings into the future because we see that as being a big part of the market, but also it's just what we want to do. On the topic of residential conversions from office, the interesting thing is that a lot of the old office buildings, and you get a lot of them in New York, before the advent of wide-scale electric lighting and before the advent of distributed mechanical systems, where if you wanted air, you open the window. All of those older typologies of office buildings, a lot of them have been successfully converted into residential. And the reason for that is because
residential.
Yeah, high-end residential. You think about lofts and all these sorts of buildings, but predominantly that's because they had to function without mechanical systems and electrical systems, and so their floor plate was such that it suited residential conversion. With some of the larger floor plate buildings, like 30 Pirry Street is a sort of an example of that. There's challenges around actually getting the floor plate to work with converting it to residential and getting enough daylight in. there's complexities with fire access and egress and that sort of thing. And then not so much the lifting strategies, but it's something that comes into it because the lifting strategy for a commercial building is different to a lifting strategy for a residential building. But ultimately, it just kind of it stacks up. On a lot of projects that have been examined in South Australia, it's just not financially viable. What I think we're seeing, and I saw an article in the Financial Review today, which was talking about it's because we're having this massive stranding. Well, not stranding, that's the wrong word, but a massive increase in the use of, in the number of B, C, and D grade office properties across Melbourne, Adelaide, and Sydney, and those properties, they may be, some of them may be there'll be a tipping point where perhaps because of the proximity and because of what can be commanded for the cost per unit or whatever, some of those will be converted to residences, probably in Melbourne and Sydney first. And so you put the extra investment in to maybe cut the light well through the building or adjust the floor plate, or you have to do a few more of those more larger, the bigger interventions. But in an Adelaide context, I'm still worried a lot about the kind of CD grade stuff because I think there'll be some vacancy for some time until that becomes like that residential conversion becomes economically viable.
Yeah, great topic. Just on that though, the property councils come out and saying things like, we want people to come back to their commercial residences, and this apparently the government's come back and sort of said, no, we need to start advocating for work from home, and the property councils come back and said, no, we don't want. I want people to come back to their offices and use the office spaces and bring back life to the city.
Yeah.
Who's the opposing voice to the property council? Because they're a powerful lobby. My thing would be converting maybe sort of commercials into more. Who's the opposing voice there in terms of, we know that could be done, but who's overriding that lobby voice? And getting the opportunity out to speak to them about it?
Good question.
Very good question.
Probably slightly off topic, but I'll answer it very briefly because I'm sort of semi-passionate about it. So there is a massive push for increase in residential living in the city of Adelaide, and that is being pushed on 3 fronts. And so because it's being pushed on 3 fronts, it will happen. It's inevitable. And so the people that are pushing that are the Premier, because him and the Treasurer and their government departments are aware that there's not enough housing in South Australia to achieve their aims and ambitions. And greenfield development's one part of it. But yeah, they see opportunity in the city. The Property Council and a lot of their members, and also the Adelaide City Council and a lot of their electorate are small to medium business owners in the city of Adelaide that have seen a slowdown ever since COVID because of the reduced number of office workers in the city overall. And so they're all for more people living in town because that will buoy the businesses. So getting back to your original question though about who's going to oppose the Property Council, yeah, that's a tricky question.
You gave a great alternative answer to it though. That doesn't. Yeah, well done.
But it's but picking up on even that thread, right? And sorry, we'll come to the question, George. But if we're going to take a circular lens to sort of that, some of the things that we're learning before, right? It's sort of like, okay, it's like, yes, we're seeing that, and everyone's saying like that's the channel that this becomes, like it's greenfield or adaptive reuse. Like that's the only kind of like channels to go through. Then what are some other sort of points of like, what do we have to question? What are some of the other bits around like when you're saying, hey, is it? It's like, is it really? Yeah, it depends. It's like how can we start to have like
I love that
work
example
that stuff
of
in?
Should we be working from home or should we be coming into our offices again and working again? And like it's not an obvious answer in terms of environmental benefits, in terms of social. Like, what does it mean for us as a system and community? both in the way how we interrelate to each other and how we get work done, and also environmental benefits or disbenefits of either. So there's obviously benefits in not transporting yourself to work, but working from inefficient houses with terrible, terrible heating, I'm really not convinced the environmental kind of efficiencies are gone. I know when I come into my work, it's a great space that's actually heated correctly. I can take my 3 layers of jumpers off and not have a heater on me.
For some.
For some, but there's bigger questions around how we behave as a system and how do we adapt so we can do a bit of both and hybridize the office and stuff like that. So I love kind of trying to pick apart those questions to say, well, maybe it's not an either or. How can we make a mix work and a bit of a tapestry work as well? Yeah, that's right. And that maybe there'll be some offices that turn from commercial to residential, but wouldn't it be great if we do have really vibrant office spaces where people are clicking and interacting, and workspaces, like imagine a space where people from different parts of the value chain or supply chain came to work in the same office and were able to meet each other over the coffee machine and talk about circular economy, like just think completely differently as well.
100%. I mean, is the way we kind of work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, is that the right way as well?
People actually do that still.
Apparently. I mean, we had to just redo our signatures, and that was one of the things. And I was like, what? What are we doing? So it's a case of really questioning our system, right? And it's a case of saying it's actually okay. I might choose to work 4 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then actually have the rest of my day, or whatever the case is. How do we do things differently? So I think for me, it's a case of like, how do we keep asking questions and question the status quo? Because we're not going to solve our any issues or change the way we do things unless we start asking questions about everything.
Yeah, and I think that's also the interesting thing, where if we can think about circular, and like built environment always has a cost, right? But then I think a lot of the inability of thinking things in whole of life and a cost, or whole life opportunities and things like that, start making things a little bit short-sighted. Like even the thing around office space, right?
Yeah.
It's like yes, if people aren't hosting businesses or paying rent in here, then what else are we going to do? That's one trajectory that we have to think about. What does those assets become? But on the other side of things is like, you could just downsize your office.
Yeah.
And
Which
huge.
we
That's a huge.
city.
Like almost
They're
every
downsized, but they
organization is
completely
doing that.
shifted the way they work. So there's more collaboration space. The share space is really, really good. We've got beautiful desks with our double screens, and we've got a locker. So it's actually downsized, but we've got a better quality product that actually suits us with our way of working now as well. So it's awesome. We've got coffee machines and sorry, that's why I can't.
I was going to say.
So you can save on all those things at home. That's right. Yeah. We also had another question or comment.
Question. As advocates of the circular economy, if I'm a builder, who just want to start doing something about the circular economy, what would be the low hanging fruits that you think that I should start trying to collect?
Fun question.
Circular building
Who wants to go?
Yeah, you can go first if you want. I've got an answer. I don't know. For me, because builders, I'll make my answer very short.
Yeah.
So builders increasingly are brought in on projects earlier and earlier these days, because the design community is relying increasingly on specialist subcontractors and others to kind of finalise designs. So in the old days, we might have done, spent longer to design everything and detail everything. So the benefit with that is having the builder on early is that they can help bring some of their industry experience to projects. And so if I was a builder wanting to get involved in the circular economy, what I would do is I would rapidly establish connections within the market with everything to do with salvaged materials, just as like a first thing, right? I'd go to all the salvage yards. I'd get them all to set up spreadsheets and then send me spreadsheets weekly. So I've got all this information. I can pass it on to the design team. That's what I would do.
That's your side hustle future.
But
Yeah.
But the
Interesting-
salvage yards know the
interestingly,
value.
someone has given that a go.
Yeah.
It's called Super Yard.
Super yard. Yeah.
Yeah. They've tried to create a more of like a this genius person who created a website. That sounds familiar. Every genius creates a website, right? But it's trying to be that online marketplace. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. That's really, really good. There's just so much, I guess, not even salvage materials, but unused materials from major infrastructure projects that could be either gifted or sold back into the economy rather than being like, I can't do anything with this. This project purchased it, so technically it's theirs. So it's just going to be chucked.
Connected to that, maybe don't overestimate.
Oh.
Nice. Well, I'll let you talk about funky business models. That's fun, isn't it?
Say what? Did I hear that correctly? Did you say funky or?
I said funky business models, as in really cool. Is that okay? No,
I thought you dropped the F-bomb before me. I was about to say, good work.
No, I'll talk about some boring stuff. I really like getting business to just go, okay, what stuff are you using and how much of it is coming into your business, and then how much of it is going out of your business, and thinking through what needs. So the thing about over ordering, for example, how much is coming in, how much is going out, and understanding those flows. Like, it's so basic. But most companies, like, they might know a little bit of their waste flow. I imagine building companies would be a bit better at what they're ordering, but often they don't have a good vision of those material flows coming in, and getting them to think about how they could think about that a little bit differently, rationalize, use certain componentry, like get a bit of modularity going in their material flows, and thinking through how to design out waste. So that's just working with what they've got now, and not sort of busting out into other big building models. But that's a very low-hanging fruit thing that I would do
waste,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
great example of that is reinforcing on site. There's some colleagues of mine in Perth, and they've actually developed this little business side hustle within Arup, but offering it to contractors. So what they were finding is that the Rio people would just schedule bars for the concrete slab, but that was just a bit sloppy, and there would be a lot of steel over, which it wouldn't go in the bin; it would be recycled, but there's still a lot of cost in it. Yeah, and so they basically worked out a way to digitize the design to scheduling part of that, take that away from the reinforcing scheduler people, and almost eliminate all waste. So there's no bars being wasted. So that's a tangible example of that. Yep.
Yeah, and that's even those kind of bits are the reasons for like prefabrication, modularity, offsite construction. But I think that's also kind of like a nod that the circular economy does. Like when people are thinking about opportunities, a lot of the opportunities is also, what's it called? Advanced manufacturing, AI, as well as digitization of things. And then it's sort of like this whole systemic sort of outlook is never completed without the information flows, the digitization of things. And we should be really thinking of those as like fantastic opportunities to really grasp on and really champion those industries, as well as the businesses that will arise or scale out of that. You had a question down here?
I guess people in this room are probably the choir, and my question is, what do you find more effective when communicating with people that you want to sort of bring into this mindset? Is it more the risk of things falling apart, or is it the hope or economic benefits? What tends to drive people more strongly?
It depends.
Yeah.
For me, so far, it really depends on who you're speaking to, and how receptive they are, to be honest. And sometimes it's actually showing the cost. So just based on some of what we were just talking about, the resource efficiency, and showing the true cost of what waste means or what recycling means. So for example, when I've done resource efficiency work before, going through an industry, I say, well, take me through your process in a minute, but take me to your waste yard first. So I'll go there first and I'll have a look and see all the skips and everything's going in there. And then I'm going, cool, so why is there? And then you start asking questions and they say, great, let's now walk through the process. And you really start getting a good understanding, because many people only see the cost and stops at their gate. But as soon as you start actually adding up all the costs, because whatever's in that skip, it's lost material, it's lost labor time, it's lost electricity, it's lost water, it's all those things going into those waste items in that skip, as well as the material itself. So when you actually start adding all those costs together, so sometimes that's the swing. More so now at the moment, carbon's the swing. So it just depends on where you are, who you're speaking to, the level of maturity.
But it sounds like you're very much framing it in a business opportunity sense as well,
Yes.
right? So I kind of understood the question as, do we go into a boardroom and say the earth is on fire, we need to stop this right now? And I think it's really important that there's certain people that do that. I think it's incredibly important. Like Greta's got a really important role to play. I don't find, like, it petrifies me and actually puts me into a space where I don't want to change. And you're seeing a young generation who are panicked and who have incredible problems with anxiety and who don't bother doing anything because they know that we're screwed. So I'm very big on, I'm like the cheerleader of the circular economy. So I'm really big on all the benefits, how we can move, how we can go slowly, because I think it is scary, and sometimes you just want to shout and go, just stop what you're doing, close the business. But like getting them moving in the right direction, it might be slow to start with, getting them moving and getting them to see that picture in a way that connects with them, and they can go, oh yeah, I've got a role to play in this. There is a system that works, and I think that's the difference between circular economy and some of like sustainability type framing, where it's the world's on fire. We need to, here's our list of indicators, and we need to be less bad at everything. And actually, when you start doing LCA, it's like a massive exercise in just how we can't do anything without damaging the earth, right? Whereas circular economy is giving you this lovely vision of, if we got the economy right, this is what it would look like. So we've got something to drive towards and not just this fear to drive away from.
We've been requested a quick clarification of LCA.
Oh. Sorry, who's the? You want to go?
Go.
Do it.
Think I'm a circular economy nerd. LCA stands for Life Cycle Assessment, and it is a methodology for evaluating the whole life cycle impacts on the environment of a product or a service or a thing or a material. So take a chair, what were all the environmental impacts with growing or digging up the materials to go in the chair? What does it need washing over its life? What happens at end of life? So at each stage, what are the different environmental impacts of the chair?
Brilliant. And in regards to the built environment, the way that LCA's life cycle analysis or assessments have been...
Analysis in America, assessment.
Oh my goodness!
Well,
Got
it's
it.
an important distinction.
That is very true. That is very true.
Training people up at the moment.
Potato, aluminum, aluminium. No. But from the built environment sense, the life cycle assessment has now become an essential component of project evaluation, mainly through the lens of carbon. But then that's the bit, is that as a lot of us become a lot more literate in the realm of life cycle assessment, as well as carbon generally, it gets really conflated between, life cycle assessment being like embodied carbon, which it's not. Like a life cycle assessment is the full life cycle, cradle to grave, and then hopefully potentially even cradle to cradle.
A really important aspect around life cycle assessment, which has the systems overlay, is around trade-offs. So trade-offs between impact on water, impact on energy, impact on biodiversity. So you're often having to trade off between these things, and trade-offs between impacts at different stages in the life cycle as well. So it does help give that system lens as well, and where are the hotspots happening.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. And a very well tested sort of methodology as well. So it's not like, like what's like where's the wind moving kind of thing like that. So that's the good part. But then translating that into what the value is, like what is this really trying to solve, becomes like that next one. Because I'll be honest, in a lot of our industry and just society in general, people don't really, like, the literacy is just not there yet. But then that's where the encouragement and bringing people on the journey. Another question over here?
Yeah, I have a very simple question, and yeah, it also can have an answer of it depends. But yeah, my question is like a coin with the two sides. The first side is that, does this whole circular economy things require a nudge or a mandate? And if mandate, how far we are from that thing?
Thank you. Carrot stick.
Yeah, I think that I was involved in this research project to do with the circular economy in buildings, specifically for systems and components in buildings. And we did a case study and with some real businesses, and we hit a lot of dead ends, and we realized pretty quickly that even with all the will in the world, some of these businesses they just can't change away from their linear model, because if they did, they'd be out of business because everyone else is linear. So I think to transition a whole sector from linear to circular, there needs to be a mandate or regulation of some kind, and we're seeing that around the world.
Yep.
So you go to the UK, and there's different mandates around reuse of buildings, and what can you demolish, what can't you demolish, or actually can you demolish anything in the City of London? Not even. There's some, you might know the specifics more than me, but there's regulation in the UK and in Europe which is much stronger than here, and that's driving services and businesses to innovate, to deliver services within that new framework. So there's definitely a bunch of work that needs to be done on the advocacy side from you and others, everyone in the room, to really push people to put those regulations in place, I think.
I'm smiling because you mentioned the City of London. So when I worked in France for a period of time, and I was part of the Cities and Governments Network of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
Yep.
And London was as well. And at that stage, they were developing their circular economy route map. And then from that came, what do they call it? It's circular economy. They have to do a circular economy statement as part of their planning regulations for developments of a certain size, and they're trying to filter that down to make it more, and then that's part of the planning spiel.
There's nothing like that in South Australia.
No, there's nothing like that's really, really out there.
Yeah.
But it's exciting because Wayne Hubbard, who's the CEO of an organisation called ReLondon that's developed and driven all this, he's coming to Australia for a week in September, and he's going to be meeting lots of people to talk about that in Brisbane and Melbourne. So we're really excited about that.
Green industries, tie it and link
and
it
you'll
up.
meet him at Ecologic.
Yeah. Sally, what's your hot take on mandates and nudges?
Oh gosh, and I understand here regulation and mandates really work. I come from a space where they're kind of guidelines. So without the enforcement and without any of that, they don't necessarily work. And I think they're pros and cons for both. And I think that we need to, when we are making those regulations and policy requirements, just to think a little bit longer and harder about what that means for the bigger village that we live in. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I'll give you an example now. This push and this rebates that we get for moving to electric vehicles sounds amazing, right? Like, let's all get an EV. We can get some money back from the government. This is great. But unfortunately, it's going to have a knock-on effect. So we're getting rid of a perfectly good car, what happens to that perfectly good car? It's probably going to be transported to an emerging economy where we kind of have a linear lock-in because now we're, so I think when we make these transitions, because it is a transition, that we need to think a little bit longer and a little bit harder and maybe have some alternatives or like parallel ways of doing things. It's not just a yes or no, yes, more regulations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think let's think it through.
Yeah.
Longer. And it does depend. it certainly does. Like I think with the built environment space, it might work really, really well. And in this kind of localized, environment, absolutely. Why not? Why can't we push it? But it's not like a blanket. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a point when you were talking about everyone's kind of going linear, and then what kind of came in my head is like, what is that?
Yeah.
What is something that becomes? I mean, even if we're thinking about lines, because I mean, I have an architecture background, so I love lines, right? Straight lines, and then this one's linear right here, but then this one's kind of coming perpendicular, and then it's be able to intersect there and be able to take something where another one linear is kind of there, and it's like, together, kind of thing like that. So it's like it's not necessarily like. Yes, the circular economy is around material flows and how can they keep on like circulating around. But like I think the one thing that the other part that circular economy becomes really powerful for me as like just like a not necessarily like an ethic, but then like an approach is just kind of saying like you can be like just hold down your space. It's fine. But we need to kind of think about where is that perpendicular business or something like that that's going to be able to assist you? Or what's that process? What's that service? What's that product that's going to be able to help with that thing that's really linear? So it's like, and that's where I kind of fell down. I was like, this is never alone. Like, so one company, you don't try to be circular, or one building project, it's not meant to be circular in itself. No. It's meant to identify how does it actually intersect as well as almost collaborate with other systems around it. And I think that's the part that I'm like is the hardest part to break apart. I mean, like we're interconnected to these things, so we actually need to enable the things that help with the interconnections, not how do you just stay on its own.
Exactly. Yeah.
Embrace collaboration and embrace working in a really messy, complex space. It's fun.
Yeah. Now that you all are on the precipice of becoming circular economy, not experts, but advocates. Cheerleaders, advocates, enablers, all of the above. Look, we're coming down to our time together. And I usually try to say like, oh, what's the takeaway? But I think we've had a lot of takeaways. There's too many takeaways. So I just want to see if this will work. And I'm pretty sure it will because you're very intelligent people.
Oh, gosh.
So if it doesn't, we've failed.
Is that
collectively?
What was sort of a aha circular economy moment for you? It's like, oh, I like that. And then how can we learn something from it?
Oh my God.
Go, Nick.
Today or generally?
Generally, in your life. You have years to pull from.
My circular moment for me was when I was working with David Ness on this project, and I had this sort of realization that if we want to reuse building materials or building systems and components, systems, materials and components, we need to have very detailed information on them, and we need to have systems in place to store that information and transfer that information, and we don't quite have that yet. So that's the first thing that comes to mind anyway.
Thanks, Nick.
3-part response. First big bang was learning about life cycle assessment at a 2-day international conference where it was life cycle assessment on food, right? So all that complex methodology on what you can't eat and you can't go out and you can't eat this and don't eat that, like it was petrifying. So being in that world of, oh my God, like the impacts are so huge, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
And then being confronted with circular economy as a concept that gives that there's a place that we can go to and not something we can run away from. So that really just lit up everything. I felt like I'd been working on all different parts of the puzzle. I couldn't quite see how it fit together. And the circular economy framework it kind of really revved me up. I went, yep, I get this. And then the third part is how long things take. So when I first got to France, the French are slow, right? They have a lot of coffees between decision making, and you've got to talk to everyone. And little Australian was there going, just hurry up. I could have done it by now. It would be awesome. And it was only after working at this organisation for 7 years and looking around me, and we'd done these amazing solar panels and we'd done this project and that project, and I was like, oh my goodness, we've really created something here, and I wouldn't have been able to do any of that racing by myself and going to the quickest solution. So realising that it takes that grunt work and time to get many people over the line rather than just going, yeah, I've got the solution, I'm going to smash this. And I think that's a really important part of circular economy as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody.
Great. So I suppose one of my aha moments was actually at school and seeing litter, just litter after coming in from recess, just going, this is so weird. Why is this happening? And that was just kind of going, okay, well, this is strange. And so that was always kind of like my way. We've got to do things differently. This isn't right. And then it was a case of working with waste in my career. It was a case of, this is an indicator of a broken system. Our system's broken. Waste basically was just that little porthole to say, it's not just solid waste. It's liquid waste. It's pollution. That's waste. It's all these things, and it's all that our systems are actually connected. There is no way. So, and the aha moment really came to me when I would take corporates to a landfill site, where you would stand on the landfill site. They're not like here. Very real experience. And you can feel the ground shaking. You can smell it. You can hear it. You can taste it. And people leave very changed after that day, because they realize there is no way. We can't design ourselves out of it in the current system. We've really got to change the way we do it. So we can't tweak. We've actually got to fundamentally shift. Sorry.
Awesome. What are you sorry about?
That seems very dramatic. Got it.
Well, it wouldn't be the ASBN experience without a little bit of drama. So
you got it.
If you all could join me and for a round of applause and thanking Nick, Jody, and also Sonia. And of course, thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to Green Industries for helping us, I guess, as a thematic stream, and all of the other organizations that help power the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, which is in our Green Book. If you haven't gotten a copy of that, fantastic resource. Tell your friends, family, your neighbor about the Green Book as well. It's a nice document, huh? Yeah, exactly. But again, the ASBN, we're filled with volunteers. So we really appreciate everyone showing up. Mauricio, say hi. This is Mauricio. This is Marina. Milad, who's not signed up, but he wants to be. Yeah. And then we also have Carrie in the back as well. You know, this is our team. And George, sorry.
George, right in the front.
Right up front. You know, and of course with various collaborators, such as the 4RT crew. You know, making sure we capture all these things. You know, we really, again, really appreciate you all, and we run events all the way to November, because the reason for that is there's no reason to do anything in December. So, you know, stay in touch. We're going to continue to have some fantastic sessions. We also have online sessions, and things like that. And yeah, if you took one thing away,